Happy Wednesday. I'm Vanessa with Unmasked. If you're new, welcome to my channel. And if you're one of our loyal returning subs, then welcome back and thank you. I just realized I hadn't turned the link quick enough. So hopefully I'll just wait a second and let it fill up a little bit. But tonight I'm really excited to have my friend Mike King from Profiling Evil here with us to talk about a couple cases and his new book.
Hey,
Mike.
Vanessa, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's really nice to be on your show. I always love coming on because you always have like this cool decoration stuff going on, the fire, cool backgrounds. I mean, my stuff's always the same.
I need to step it up. No, I'm weird about aesthetics. Ask my team. They make fun of me because it's a running joke that we even have colors we wear and stuff. I get a little carried away with that stuff, but that's okay.
Yeah, my wardrobe is planned each morning based on whatever I happen to grab as I reach up. And so often I need like the Garanimals for kids because most often my stuff doesn't match. So
yes, I forgot to tell you the memo to wear white tonight, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's been a while. We were just talking about this before we started this stream. I think just with the holidays and stuff coming up, it's been a while since we've talked. The last time I talked to you, you were in Amsterdam, I think it was.
Oh, yeah. I spent almost a month in Europe, most of that in Eastern Europe. And I was over there meeting with law enforcement and public safety officials for my day job. And while I was there, I got to look into a serial killer in Latvia and really had a great experience exploring that. Actually met with some of the Profiling Evil folks who follow our show, and we sat around and chatted about serial crimes. But most importantly, we talked about this one particular serial killer, a guy named Petros, and talked about all the people that he killed and the influence that it had. But I found out that one of the members was actually had family members murdered by the KGB. And so the story just kept getting bigger and bigger about what was going on in their personal lives as as Latvia was fighting for independence from Russia and everything else. So anyway, it was a lot of yammer, and
that is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never got to sorry guys, my throat's hurting a little bit tonight. I never got to follow up with you on the serial killer thing that you were doing. So I meant to, but that is so cool. You've been busy, to say the least.
It's been a busy year. Things are starting to ramp up. I have been running around. We've been doing lots in Australia, and then of course my day job keeps me busy, and then trying to at night catch up on cases and yet still be a husband and a grandpa. So,
well, and I just want to take a little second to brag on you for a minute because you brought up Australia. I want to talk about that a little bit because I think that's so cool. Your whole mapping. I want you to be able to say it though, because that's really cool too. You have a lot of really, I don't know, interesting stuff going on, some cool achievements that you just got.
Oh, well, man, that's so nice. You know, I spend a lot of time in Australia. I've been to every state in the country, and I've been with the indigenous people back in the outback, and working with law enforcement over there. I've had the opportunity to work with them as they prepared for the G20 summit and some other kind of big deal things as time has gone on, and been able to see how they respond to the fires. And we think we have wildland fires here. Holy cow, their wildland fires are just incredible. But we decided to try this idea of looking at a serial crime in the United States and a serial crime in Australia, since it's, halfway around the world. I get in trouble sometimes because I say down under, but I get half the Aussies that say down under is perfect and expected. Others that say I really don't like that term. But we came up with this concept of doing a comparison of a serial killer in Australia and a serial killer in the United States. And while they're half a world apart from each other, looking at the behavioral characteristics and the similarities in victim selection and the way in which they committed the
Hmm.
homicides and the way they got away with their crimes. We called it Mapping Evil with Mike King, and people can look it up at mappingevil.com. But this thing exploded. I mean, it went to like number 3 on Apple's podcast, and we just launched in Singapore about 3 weeks ago, and it's screaming up through the charts. I spent 2 hours with 30 commanders from the Singapore National Police last week on a phone call that all started because of Mapping Evil with Mike King. So it was kind of fun because we were talking about how to use geography and behavior in investigations, and so we've had a lot of fun, and it's been really rewarding. Plus, I just love it down there, and I love
Mm.
the many friends and folks from Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Southeast Asia. They're all just such great people.
That is so cool. I'm gonna have to check that out, and I'm also gonna have to add that to the description below because that sounds fascinating,
Oh,
to compare the 2.
it's kind of fun, and I do it with a famous broadcaster from Australia. She's on the national news, and her name is Tori Shepard, and she's this quirky Australian that kind of keeps me on task, and I'm just kind of the old gruff, dusty guy that comments about cases, and we have a really nice synergy, and it's just been a blast.
Oh, well, that's so cool. Well, congratulations on that too.
Oh, thank you.
This is why we haven't talked in so long.
That's right.
Um, so I know tonight I wanted to talk about a few cases that we've been really into, and I know that you've been helping follow as well. And then I did want to, of course, get into your new book. So,
Well, thank you.
but there's so much going on. I didn't even know how to kind of narrow it down because there's so much going on. But I know we talked a little bit about you've been following Heidi Planck's disappearance as well, right?
Yeah, that one really intrigued me, and I know that you've been doing a lot, and I think you got some really big stuff coming on that. But a crazy case as you started looking at it from the very onset. How does somebody just
Mhm.
disappear like she disappeared? And I'm really excited for what you've got rolling down and the kind of the things that you've been covering on it. It's just a fascinating case.
It is, and there's so many moving parts to it. That's why of course, I had questions. I always have questions for you, but we do have her cousin Trey coming on tomorrow,
That's
for an
fantastic.
interview,
How do
and
you do this, Vanessa? You always get these like really cool guests, and well, it's such a compliment to the quality of stuff that you put out. I I mean, people that are on here already know, and I'm not trying to be too sweetsy, but you really do an amazing job, and I just think that's a real tribute to you that these people are willing to come on with you, that they trust you to the level that they would.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Honestly, it's my team. My team is so passionate about these cases, and they get so we get and just like for example, Heidi, it's been now what we're approaching the 8-week mark. I think that she's been since she's been missing. It was October 17th,
Yeah.
and you talk to these family members, and I know we're all a bunch of empaths over here, but it breaks your heart because they don't have any answers. We're coming up on the holidays. And then, you know, we all, kind of branch out and talk to each other as YouTubers because we want the most coverage we can get for them. And we know how powerful that tool is. So, you know, I'm glad to see you covering it too, but I
Well,
am I
what was your thought initially? I mean, when you looked at that, number one, with all the noise that's going on with what her boss is involved in, what
yeah.
her ex-husband is pitching out about mental illness and other kinds of things, this thing really got cloudy fast. What was your thought initially as you started looking at the case?
Mm, I'm so glad you mentioned that because, uh, and I was going to give them a quick recap in case anyone didn't,
That'd be
isn't familiar
great.
with this case. But I'm so glad you mentioned that because, Heidi's not here to defend herself. And one thing I noticed when talking to her family is, one person can put out a story like that, but that's not necessarily true. But it's interesting how we start to form the story begins to form around these accounts that we don't necessarily know are accurate. And I find that fascinating, but it's also frustrating at the same time because we have this story we think that is formed kind of, but it's all coming from kind of the same sources. So I think it'll be interesting to talk to some other people and get going to do some cross referencing. But for those of you who don't know, Heidi Planck is 39. She was from Downey, California. She was last seen October 17th. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I'm pretty sure she was had just gone to her 10-year-old son's football game, and her ex was there as well. And there's a lot of allegedlys and a lot of reportedlys in here because this is what we're getting, that she was attending that. She left early. We don't know why. And she allegedly did text her son later to say congratulations on the win. She had called her family back in New York earlier saying that she was going to come home for Thanksgiving to it's outside of Buffalo to New York. So she was making future plans too. She had her dog Seven, and we see that on camera. And I don't know if you know any of these gaps, but there's a few unknowns after the game. But she ends up at this Hope and Flower luxury high rise in Los Angeles. And we know that because her dog Seven is found later wandering around the 28th floor, but no sign of Heidi. And then it just gets weirder from there. It's just a strange case.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting going back and just kind of following her tracks that morning. We have the early morning video of her going out and walking out with her coffee in one hand
Hmm.
and the dog in tow. We see her with her phone, and I think a lot of noise was created around that image. But she had about a 30 when I mapped it out anyway. And you know me, I'm kind of goofy about mapping, but it was about a 35-minute drive based on that time of day in Los Angeles down to where the ball game was played. And then you hear this testimony, and I think police have even said it, so I feel much more confident that it is what came out in the interviews with the ex-husband and what he said on numerous talk shows since then, but that she's acting a little agitated, moving around a lot.
Hmm.
Again, we don't know if that's normal behavior for her. Some people, can't sit still without their leg bouncing up and down or something else. And so rather than kind of theorizing when we really don't know her personality, we just have to kind of take it and put it in the interesting column. But then she gets up and leaves. And the thing that I found interesting is that many people for some time, including me, assumed that she went back to her home. And I believe it was even reported that she went back to her home and then drove to the Hope and Flower apartment complex. The thing I found so interesting there is when you map it out, she would have passed the Hope and Flower going to the ball game
Hmm.
and returning back to her home. And so, if in fact she did go home, it would almost seem that that was not a planned event to go to the Hope and Flower. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just stop along the way? But then we learn later that she had two phones, a work phone and a personal phone. And
Hmm.
I don't think I saw a discussion the other day with Nancy Grace and uh, and Heidi's ex-husband where he said, "Well, we don't know which phone was which at home or what was with her." So all of a sudden you say, "Well, it could have been the same phone she walked out with." Because the thing I haven't seen is a photograph of her back at home if she
Hmm.
did go home after the ball game and then before heading over to the Hope and Flower. So you start wondering about that timeline and if she did go home. Something happened that caused her to go back, or it was just a planned event to go there. And what we do know for sure is that that's where she went, because her vehicle's there, her dog's there, and now
Mhm.
we know that her DNA's there.
Right. And those are good points too, because we do know that there was a phone at her residence, and then her laptop, and then her dog. And then someone had just asked in comments, do we know what the connection is to Hope and Flower? I only know rumor. I don't know fact. And so I'm hesitant to even put that out there because there
I'm
already is so much rumor.
Yeah, I'm so much like you, Vanessa. I think, and too often we see people that just spout off, "Here's why they were there."
Yes.
Until I hear something from an official source, I always just put it in the I'm going to hang on to this in the quiver
Yep.
mode. But we can assume that there's a reason she went there. We can assume that
Mhm.
there's a reason that her dog was there and went up. And I kind of try to think realistically, and there were reports that there were problems at the Hope and Flower, and that people had been complaining that there may be some drug transactions and other things going on there. But for her dog to get up to that 27th or 28th floor either
Mhm.
happens by wild happen chance, that the dog's wandering around with a leash dragging behind it, gets in an elevator, people don't uh, notice it, and it makes its way up to the 27th floor, or it went with her like she took it everywhere else. And then something happened. And so then you
Mhm.
start hearing all of the stories about the DNA and other kinds of things. And you think to yourself,
Yes.
there's a reason why she's there. What happened and what
Mhm.
are the ties? And a lot of people are saying, "Oh my gosh, it's next to the sports arena, and there's ties here and back to the company and ownership." I don't know. It could be something really goofy. Not
It
not at
could
all
be.
bad.
And that's what makes this case so weird. And for those of you who don't know, I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, there are some very interesting connections, very high powered connections, uh, with her and her job and just the people that she was around and hung around. It makes you wonder, if it was true that she was anxious, did she know she was meeting up with someone later, or was there something, pressing? Uh, and like I said, the connection to the building, I think, is obviously extremely important. I've only heard rumors, so I don't want to put that out there. But I would say it's a very solid source about talk that, she had been telling friends, you probably already know this, a week prior, that she was nervous about the upcoming, I don't know, nervous is the right word to use, upcoming tax audit, and that she had come across some papers that her name was on, and it bothered her. Her name was on these papers. Well, then your mind goes another direction.
Yeah.
Um, so, and could that be completely unrelated, like you just said? Yes, it could be. This is just one
But
of
how do
those.
you ignore that? I mean, I went back and I looked through all of the corporate records in California, Nevada, in the mountain states, and what I found was about, well, more than 20 different corporations where Heidi's listed as a principal on different corporations with different addresses, ranging from Reno, Nevada, down to throughout the LA basin.
Mhm,
That is really intriguing to me. And my first thing is like, there's a conspiracy here. And
mhm,
then I get thinking, well, wait a minute. She's an accountant in a firm that is doing nothing but moving money and building LLCs and corporations. And maybe she's just the goat that ends up having to sign things to get papers submitted to do it. And it might be absolutely nothing. So now I find myself on this
I
big
know.
teeter totter that says 20 plus corporations. Holy cow, that's significant. Wait a minute. That's her job. That's not that significant. Um,
Yes.
but how would you not be an accountant and not know things? And so you got to look at all the smoke coming out of her boss and the charges against him and everything else too.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, the company that she worked for is under investigation for potential fraud involving $43 million. So, I mean, that kind of money.
You could live pretty well with some budgeting on that kind of money, couldn't you?
right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then you have the piece that it changed, I believe, from to robbery homicide at the end of October. It was handed over. So then there's that. And then there was that. I actually, this is one of the things I want to ask you about. When they made that statement as ex law enforcement, and they said that they came into her place anticipating a crime scene. Why would that be? I've always wondered about that statement. I don't know why that particular statement, um, even though her dog was somewhere else, they anticipated a crime scene there.
Yeah, and I think that maybe is not that big of a deal. I mean, when you have a missing person and it's kind of a weird circumstance and you can't find their vehicle and you have to break into their house or get someone to give you a key, you go into those all the time thinking what if this is a suicide or an
Mm,
unattended death or there's some kind of crime that's gone on here. And that may
yeah.
be a byproduct of just the fact that that's what cops deal with all the time.
Yes.
Um, now they may have been told something. We don't know what that 911 call was, or the whatever that person that called in said from start to finish. So that
Mhm.
could be interesting too.
And by the way, thank you so much, Michelle. Love you. And thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate that. And then, of course, her car was found in the separate parking garage on November 4th, a few miles away, which I was told it was like a 14-minute walk where her car was. It will be interesting to see the details on that parking garage, I think.
Yeah, and that's
Which,
what's going to be so cool about the forensics on her phone. If and I would
mhm,
think that they had recovered that by now. But who was she meeting up? Did she meet up someone? Again, if there was narcotics involved, let's go and pick up something. What was it that got me from point A to point B and now to point C? And
mhm,
we talk about those crime scenes a lot. We talk about where was the initial contact site and where did the crime occur. Well, if she was doing something secretive, you could see someone going and parking a long ways away and taking a bus. But you could also look in that same area and say parking's pretty hard in those areas. But is it
mhm.
that hard on a Sunday afternoon? I don't know. Was there a game going on? There's so many things that can balance and weight some of these kinds of decisions that all of a sudden they make sense because it's a free parking lot over here and I'd have had to pay here or something.
That's actually an excellent point. I didn't even think of that. So, see why I like bouncing stuff off. But no, that's a really good point. She could have just it's practical and yeah, maybe there was something going on and she did have to park far away and there's nothing nefarious there. But that is another piece. It's interesting. Yes. And then we've still got, and there's holes here that would answer a lot of questions that obviously we're not going to be privy to. Just like there's camera footage that we have not seen, texts that people are talking about, but we don't know what was said. And I thought it was interesting that, she was, allegedly maybe arguing with her ex that morning, but then, and he also said she was arguing with her boyfriend that same time. And her boyfriend is a VP of operations for Mark Zuckerberg's charity, which he's not a person of interest or anything. I personally find that to have no relation. I just thought that was another interesting piece of the whole case. The whole
Yeah.
thing is, um,
What did you think of the donut delivery?
and that is so strange. Okay, I think do you guys all think that's weird too? I don't quite understand. So her boss dropping off, was it donuts or muffins to her
It was
place
like
after?
yeah, you guys muffins. I'm a cop, that's, that
Does
the only word I can think of is
that
donut.
your mind just went to donuts. Um, but he drops off these uh muffins when she's already gone, or and she's disappeared.
Yeah.
And I don't know. This is a strange case. And then of course you had the rumors that a lot of people immediately, of course, everywhere at the beginning was saying, well, she must have, she probably took off or something. But that is not the way that this has led at all. And it's really sad because her son had a birthday, is my understanding, after she disappeared. And that breaks my heart because she missed
Yeah.
is for her son, and then she missed his birthday. And when I read that he was texting her phone, that just that
Yeah.
got to me.
That is hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Vanessa, before I forget, I wanted to just mention on the car too. The other thing that we have to consider is whether there's staging going on, because again, we know the DNA's there, we know
Mhm.
the dog's there at the apartments, then the
Yep.
vehicle ends up at a place that is causing some head scratching. So, when we were children and we would make mistakes, we'd scream do-overs and we'd play the scenario again. Well, when you can't do a do-over, maybe moving the car and trying to get the attention away from a location is
Mhm.
a really smart thing for an offender to do too. So we can't disregard that maybe that vehicle was moved by somebody else later to just create a red herring. And I saw one of your listeners who put up about the cameras and CCTV, and that's obviously something that law enforcement's collecting and going through hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV to try to figure out if something like that pops up.
Yes. And what's also sad is I think, this is in mainstream media. I was reading more about it last night, but they found, forensic evidence now um, at the Hope and Flower that has led them to searching. I think it was starting on November 29th. They started searching a landfill that was quite a distance away from the Hope and Flower. So I guess to ask you, in your experience in law enforcement, why would they have honed in on that particular landfill in that particular area? What would be your guess on that?
Oh, I mean, immediately my thought would be I want to find out who the refuse company is that picks up the garbage and where do they dump, and they have a
Mm,
set schedule, and I would bet that that's where I'd put my money is that they looked, and this company that has the contract to pick up garbage at the Hope and Flower deposits garbage, at least on that particular day at Chiquita landfill, and they know which region at the landfill those dumps are made, and that's why we see law enforcement out there conducting a grid search in the dump.
yeah. And obviously that doesn't, so I mean, who knows? I mean, that doesn't sound good, of course. And then you wonder, and then that takes you back to motive, which I just keep circling back to the job. And I just think that's, and my gut tells me that that's most likely what it is. Again, that's my speculation based on the limited information that we have. There could be a whole, there's a lot that we don't have. Law enforcement's being extremely tight-lipped, which is a great thing, and we all know why they have to do that. Um, so social media is a great thing, and it can also be a horrible thing in these cases. So, um,
Yeah, you have to consider what's going on with Heidi's boss and that
right.
organization and the $43 million big huge pile of smoke that's coming up. Others have cast stones at the ex-husband because he went in and pushed for child custody. That doesn't bother me at all. That's a prudent thing to do so that he can make decisions for that child and get that child the help
Mhm.
they need, get them registered in school, everything else. So while
Yeah,
it doesn't feel good to us, some of those things are just important and need to be done.
I agree. And it's again her child that I feel the worst for in this whole
Yeah.
situation. And but so yeah, and I don't know, it keeps leading me back. And of course, we were always careful with these because I know when I was reading this, I'm sure you were the same way. Reading these documents, it's just like, wow, the people, that are connected and stuff is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, who knows? But we are going to be talking to her cousin tomorrow, and I'm excited for that because I'd like to get to know more. I mean, we've heard secondhand. It'd be nice, to talk to her family and find out who Heidi was, what her personality's like, their take on things, and maybe that can shed some more light on, I don't know, putting more pieces together. So,
Absolutely. And when we back when I used to do this for a living, when I would teach homicide detectives, that's the first thing. Your mind says, I want to answer the who done it, when in reality, we ought to be looking at the victimology. Who is this person that is murdered or disappears? And more importantly than even who is the victim, it becomes why did they become a victim? And as we start to understand more about the victimology, like we are tonight, we talked a lot about victimology. We
Mhm.
start to see certain people rise to the surface as more probable than others, and so it's a really important thing. But yeah, it's great. And I get in trouble because I smile when I talk about these cases, but I've looked at so many homicides. It's just kind of what I do. As I get excited about the behavior and everything else. So don't write an email or something to me saying, how dare you smile during a discussion of homicide. It's the behavior that I get excited about, not
Yes.
the fact that someone died.
Yes, and I think we all understand that. That is so true, though. We get comments too, and like, why did she smile? This isn't. Nobody here thinks it's funny. It's just
No.
we do geek out about this stuff, and we do like to help, and we do like to put things together and try to help if we can. And then if you don't smile, they're like, why are you so boring? Why aren't you more invested in this case? But yeah, I know what you're saying. And I think that'll be an important piece to get tomorrow from her family, so I am excited about that. Um, and then, of course, I wanted to talk to you about, and I know this is a hard one for a lot of people to talk about, especially parents, but I want to talk to you about the Oxford high school shooting.
Boy, that's been a tough one, hasn't it?
Yes. Um, I have so I'm and I don't want to, you guys, just so you know, I don't want to get into any kind of political. We don't do politics on this channel, and I don't think it even needs to go there. But I was more fascinated, and what I wanted to talk to you about was the parent aspect. Is I was reading more and more about that last night, more details about his behavior at school and at home, and kind of their piece and all this. And I don't know if you have. I've never quite seen a case like this. And for those of you who don't know, it was November 29th, I believe it was. And he was 15 years old, sophomore. He's Ethan Crumbly. He came out of the bathroom with a 9mm and killed 4 of his classmates between the ages, which is heartbreaking, of 14 and 17, and injured a lot more children. So I know as a parent of a high school kid myself, that is one of my worst nightmares. Um, we've had scares, but recently, but nothing like this. And I can't help it. I know we're all talking about the fact that he had this drawing. His parents are up there at 10 a.m. Allegedly, reportedly, they resist kind of the idea of counseling. They resist bringing him home, but we don't know. This is just secondhand again. And then 3 hours later, this incident occurs. So I don't know. I guess you get into the whole what should have happened, could have, would have, should have. I guess at this point. Um,
Yeah, I had the chance last night. I actually talked about this case with an FBI agent friend and Vinnie Politan on Court TV, and we explored it for
mm,
quite some time. And the challenge, and folks, this isn't a Second Amendment issue. I mean, and
right.
I don't know. I grew up with weapons. I spent a career with weapons. Now my wife disagrees with my opinions on weapons, but this isn't a discussion about Second Amendment rights to
I
bear
agree.
arms. This is a discussion about should a 15-year-old who, by all accounts, doesn't even have the brain cells to be handling a weapon, should a
Mhm.
15-year-old have open access to a weapon, and should a parent be held responsible if they allow that child to have access to a weapon? And I think that's what this is really boiling down to. Because
Mhm.
at first, when I heard him charging the parents, I was a little offended, thinking, how dare they? I can't be held responsible for somebody else's behavior. But if all of a sudden all of the information that's rolling out is true, and we've had it released from the government,
Yes.
saying here's what's in the arrest affidavits, here's what the school, Oxford school, district has released in their letter asking for an independent investigation, that the weapons bought shortly after Thanksgiving, that the next day they're on a firing range with the boy shooting it. He's socializing, look at my new weapon,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden he's looking for ammunition, and thank goodness that teacher didn't put up with that baloney and demanded that
Mhm.
there was some accountability. And yet then we see a parent who, according to all reports,
Mhm.
texts laughing out loud, "Don't get caught." I mean, now I can start to understand why a prosecutor says, well, gosh, there's a little bit of responsibility here.
And then you've got the picture the next day that, for those of you who don't know, basically, I mean, I don't know how else to, I'm not trying to make it more than it is, but it basically depicts a school shooting. I would say it's got the elements of what happened. That happens that day. They called them up, and it says that they kind of, I don't know, the impression I got from all of the different articles and everything I've read is that they kind of scoffed at the counseling and did not want to take him home. Now, of course, you've got the whole, why wasn't the backpack searched? But, you know, I know that that's commonplace at my daughter's school. However, the bigger thing for me, obviously, is they didn't want to take him home. Did they not take it seriously? Did they not know? They're probably more familiar with his behaviors than the school was by far. We know he has videos on his cell phone talking about it. Um,
Yeah.
and that was his Christmas present. He had access. If the gun wasn't loaded, I don't know if you know that detail. If the gun wasn't loaded at the time, he had access to the ammo to load it. So, you know,
Yeah, no, and I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is descriptions of the picture. I know
mhm,
last night Vinny brought out, well, but is this kid calling out for help because it says help me on the picture that he's
mhm,
drawing? And I countered that with, or is it part of his fantasy? And the word help me is the people that are being shot screaming help me. We just don't know, but what we can do is look at the thing factually and say that there was concern. I think the school did everything that they could do. We may see that there were failures. They called him in. They told the parents, counseling, this kid needs counseling, and if you don't get it, then we're going to refer you to child family services.
mhm,
um, that they were told by the parents, and this one I'm going to push over to the allegedly, no, we don't think it's that big a deal, we're going back to work, you keep him here. And we know the kid, by all reports, pulls out a weapon and shoots 11 classmates, killing 4 of them. Those are hard facts. Get
mm.
rid of all the rest, and then just go back and look at the behavior. Were these pictures fantasy and preparation? Were the videos something that we should have been aware of? And it's easy to look back and say, what should we have done? But
Right.
they did it. They stopped it. And yet that wasn't accepted, and the kid had to stay in school, and then what happened happened.
And I do agree with those of you in chat that are saying that no parent would ever think that their child would be capable of something. And I do agree with that. You'd never think your child, I mean, I wouldn't, could be capable of something like this. But then you bring me to the texts, and the text, that one, the first text, I mean, I guess there could be different ways to interpret that. But so after he comes out of the bathroom and, and he shoots the students, and the police response was absolutely amazing on this. The police were right on it. They stopped it quickly. They probably saved a lot of lives. Um, but then it hits the news, and his mom, Jennifer, texts him, "Ethan, don't do it." I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys talked about that last night. That text is so odd. Don't do not, "Oh, did you do it?" or "Are you okay?" or "Oh my god, what's happening at your don't do it." That's, I don't know, very
Yeah,
specific.
yeah, the whole thing is this one's going to be really interesting to watch unfold. But I want to just kind of comment. And again, I kind of take a hard line, but maybe it was because I was raised with there was no democracy in my home. If a teacher said you were out of line, you didn't say no, the teacher's being mean to me, and your parents
Yes.
stood behind you. You, you shaped up. And I'm thinking, why wasn't somebody, when a person's drawing pictures of massacres and blood all over the place, saying this is inappropriate? What on earth is going on? And how does a child understand what a boundary is if somebody doesn't have the courage to set the boundary? That's the job of a parent.
Mhm. That's an excellent point. That's a very excellent point. And I see whoever put that just now in chat. That is that's a very good point as well. We don't know. We don't have all the information. We don't know if he had texted his parents my information anyway, if he texted them beforehand and given them any heads up, or if he had said anything. We don't know. I just think that that text in general, and maybe out of context, I don't know, but Ethan, don't do it is odd to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then just the whole idea, like you said, it is illegal in Michigan for a child that age to have a gun if it's not a hunting rifle or he's not hunting with an adult. He had full access to it. He had access to the ammo. It was his gift by all accounts on social media and what they were saying themselves. So it was his gun, allegedly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of talking points here, I think.
And
Um,
it reeks of it reeks of premeditation. And
yes.
it's likely that this young man will spend the rest of his life in prison for something that an underdeveloped brain decided to do.
Hmm. And I know I keep saying this, but you also do bring up a good point that I've brought up with my own kids before, which is, I'm not that parent either, that if the school calls me and says, your son did this, which I got plenty of those, I'm not going to say, how dare you? He didn't, there's no way he did that. And that's, unfortunately, I think we've kind of shifted that direction. Not all parents, but a lot. And I know because my friends that are teachers tell me about it, and they are kind of in a more difficult spot, I think, than back when we were growing up. And I mean, there's a big shift. Back when I was growing up, I mean, and I grew up in Missouri, I mean, they could practically whack you and your parent would be like, well, what'd you do? That's a different story than it is now. But in Missouri back then, that's pretty much how it was.
I would bet
Um,
most of the people in the chat are thinking, yeah, that wasn't
mhm.
that was the way it was when I grew up too.
Oh, yeah. So times have changed. So, but yeah. So I don't know. I think there's a lot here, and I just feel so bad. The whole situation is so horrible. And I did see that some of these schools reopening. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Are going to require clear backpacks now. You know,
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
it is, and of course, nothing's false. But I do want to say too, I know there's that one video I'm sure you've seen where the kids thought it was the shooter, but it wasn't. It was I guess one of the detectives. But the kids were so smart at that school and so sharp and so on it, and you could tell they paid attention to their training. So I don't know. Just watching that video choked me up because those kids were smart kids.
Yeah.
Um. Oh, and my last question on that one, and I promise I won't. I'm like, ooh, Mike's here. I get to ask him this and this and this. Um, what do you think about the pulling out the money and shutting off the cell phones and leaving?
That came up last night. We actually were listening to some dialogue from the attorney of the fellow whose art gallery they went and hid out inside of, and it's very possible he had nothing to do with it, knew nothing about it. But we see police seizing all of his computers and other things, so it makes me think that there probably were some communications through text or other things.
Mhm.
But the idea is, what's the thinking behind pulling your money and getting out of Dodge when your child is sitting in jail? That it just
Right.
brings up lots of interesting questions, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't know why you'd pull your money out. I can
Right.
see the argument. The way social media and the way we saw people acting with Brian Laundrie's parents or
Yes.
other cases, I could see people getting away and going somewhere else. Um, but I don't understand the withdrawing your money and stuff. That's interesting.
Me too.
Or responding to police when they're calling you on your phone saying, we have a warrant out for you and the US Marshals are looking for you. That's pretty significant.
Right. And if you're afraid for your safety, I think you'd be pretty safe going, I guess, to your arraignment with law enforcement all around you. And,
Yeah.
there's that. I don't know. I don't know. I definitely have my thoughts on that. But so yeah, but our hearts definitely go out to everybody that is, I've been reading on all the students that passed, and the whole thing is just so hard.
Yeah.
So Um, and I do have to ask you while you're here about Scott Peterson. I'm assuming you watched that today.
Yes, I did. I was so disappointed that I couldn't. I actually had created a little video that I posted where I kind of done a little prep stuff. Was going to put in the
Mm,
actual hearing and wrap it up, and then I learned that California law doesn't permit that, and I didn't want to go to jail very bad, so I kind of summarized it in my report. But bottom
yeah,
line was, it was pretty procedural. We knew that they were going to
right.
sentence him to life. That just had to happen because right now he's sitting on death row with no sentence after the Supreme Court turned it over, and that was the state Supreme Court is where he
Mm,
was victorious. So that was just going to be a natural thing and going to happen. What was really interesting was just to see how strongly after 18 years, uh, Lacey's family came out,
mhm.
and especially when mom called him a coward. I just
Yep.
thought, just so proud of her to be able to stare him in the face and call him that. Now the thing that's going to be interesting
Mhm.
is whether he will win a retrial in February. Many experts say he probably will, which I'm going to hold out hope that that's not the case. But this business that a burglar carried her off and dumped her body in the same body of water that he happened to be fishing at is pretty weird. But
Maybe. Yeah, that he happened to be in Googling the currents. And I
yeah,
know that that people, though, there are diehard people that 100% believe that he is innocent and he was railroaded. And I do think, and so I respect everyone's opinions. I know that's very, and I guess I never realized how strong some people feel about that. Um, but and that's the fun of debating and discussing true crime. But I'm assuming your opinions on Scott is that he is guilty as well, like mine are.
I'm a little tainted because the Modesto police chief at the time was a friend of mine,
Oh,
and so I have been studying this case since the day it happened, and I have always uh, thought there were too many coincidences, and it was a great circumstantial case. Even the fact that they found a body, it still becomes a circumstantial case because
mhm,
there are pieces of things that we'd like, that smoking gun or other kinds of things. But what we do know is that right now there's no question he's guilty because a court has found him guilty, and until he wins a retrial and is found not guilty, that doesn't change. He's guilty of murder of both
right,
his wife and his daughter or son.
right. Well, I think with everything, and I've listened to both sides and stuff, I would say that one of the most obvious things, and I've never heard an argument to, ref, you know, I don't know, refute this, but when he tells his mistress, that he's a widower and this Christmas will be the first Christmas without his wife, how does one explain that comment? I mean, he's psychic, and it just things kind of worked out that way. I mean, I thought that was probably, in my opinion, and a lot more about this case than I do. In my opinion, that was one of the most damning pieces of this case. Was that statement right there?
Yeah, I think the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge uh, was making a phone call and saying, "I'm staring at the Eiffel Tower, thinking of you." with the vigil for my wife. I thought it was maybe a search organization. Someone reminded me today it was a vigil going on in the background.
Yes,
And I'm thinking, what kind of psychopathic personality can do that kind of a deal?
exactly. Oh, there's so many things like that. And then as interviewer, just my opinion, he squeezes out the tears, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, his whole demeanor, and they brought that up today. Lacey's family did about his consistent lack of remorse, and when they called him a coward, and that was very powerful because I do agree with Lacey's family on that. Um,
Yeah. And it was interesting, even listening to his sister-in-law on Peterson's side of the fence when she got up and talked, and I didn't hear one person say, "We don't know what happened to Lacey, and we feel really bad that she's dead and that little baby's dead."
mhm,
And Connor would be 18 years old right now. Lacey would be like 43 or 46 or something. Nobody
yeah,
seemed to remember Lacey and Connor, but by
mhm,
golly, we were going to fight to get him off, and he didn't do this. Well, then who did? So,
yeah,
and the defense is going to say that a burglar may have done it, and that's pretty
yeah.
interesting. This will be interesting to watch.
It definitely will. And hopefully, we'll see what happens, but we'd love to have you back on to talk about that case, uh,
Be fun. Yeah.
in depth, especially
I love
now.
talking to you. I love your insight. It's a blast.
Yes, I agree. And well, I really do want to talk about your book though, and I know that I went on about it a little bit earlier, but I have to tell you guys, and it's linked. I fixed the link. It's linked in the description. It's called She Knew No Fear, and I've read the book and I loved it. It feels like you're watching a movie. That's how much I got sucked into the book.
That's awesome.
And I've read other books, but this one was different and I'm a very visual person, but this one was just different. I mean, you're an amazing writer, and
Well,
I could
I
just
have to
see it.
clarify. I write like a police report, and my wife actually adds a piece of humanity to it.
Well, you guys did an amazing job because it does feel like you're there. Like I said, I'm very visual, but it's like I watched it playing like a movie in my head. And so I was hoping though, because we talked about this, I have a tendency to give things away. I was hoping that you could tell us, tell everyone about the book, and I won't.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So the book "She Knew No Fear." It's in fact it's over my shoulder here. The book in the front there, but it is a 130-year-old homicide. It's about a woman named Jane McKechnie Walton, who was murdered on July 24th, 1891, at a town celebration down in the Four Corners area of the United States. And I had heard about this case my whole life growing up because Jane happened to be a relative, my great great grandmother. And I heard from her grandson uh, all about this case and the fact that it had never been solved. I went through this law enforcement career, and as I was getting close to retiring, I thought, there's one case I could look into that I haven't looked at yet. And so I spent nearly 10 years looking at this case, going to graveyards, digging through records, and of course, you in reading the book, you saw a part where I actually found an old document that two old documents that really made a difference, but after 10 years and in reality 130 years from the time it happened, was able to solve her homicide. And it was an emotional moment to kneel at her grave and to be able to know that I did everything I could. And what I always like to say to these crooks that are out there that have committed homicide is, whether on earth or in heaven, you should never quit looking over your shoulder, because these cases need to be solved, and we need to continue to look into them till they are solved. Families deserve that. So it's an
Mhm.
exploration of her life and the homicide, and gosh, I hope people would like it, and I'm just thrilled that you liked it.
Oh yeah, and it's and that's and of course it is about the homicide, but then her whole life was so fascinating. Or everything about it leading up to that. I
Yeah,
mean,
I will
she's
share
definitely
one
tough.
story. I will share one story if I can, and it's one of
Mhm.
my favorite stories. Is that Jane and her husband were part of a group that accomplished the most difficult pioneering event in U.S. history called the Hole in the Rock, where they were stranded in winter storms. And over the course of a few months, the 83 families that were there actually built a road into the 2,000-foot cliffs dropping down to the Colorado River. And from that road, they took wagon teams down and lowered 2,000 head of cattle down through that canyon. And there's some really miraculous things that happened during that period of time that I explore in the book from their journals. And I found their old journals. But when they finally get to the Four Corners area, they were constantly fighting against this outlaw band of Paiute Indians led by a fellow named Chief Posey. And Posey was just like, well, in fact, Posey became the last Native American to be killed in an official government battle between the
Mm.
U.S. Army and the Native Americans. And I use Indian in the book, and I've talked to many people and got permission that that's not disrespectful given the time and place in the country. But this Chief Posey uh, was terrorizing all of these new settlers. And one particular day, my great great grandmother was sloughing church. And this is where I learned you don't slough church, Vanessa. And
Mhm.
while she was out alone, she was hoeing her garden, and Chief Posey and his warriors rode up, and Posey got off of his pony and he demanded that she cook him something to eat. Well, she was just terrified that they might assault her or do something else, and so she tried to stall them long enough, hoping that the other people would come home from church and chase off this band of renegades. Uh, when she refused, she said, "Well, just let me finish hoeing this garden, and I'll fix you something." He raised up his hands and started screaming cuss words. And out of sheer reaction, she hit him as hard as she could with that hoe between
Mhm.
the eyes and knocked this Indian chief out. And he was stone cold unconscious on the ground. She said she was so terrified that she went back to hoeing the garden and looking out of the corner of her eyes at his braves, who were sitting pretty tall in their saddles at that point, watching what was
Mhm.
going on. And she said she heard her dog growling and turned to see the dog hanging from the breeches of Chief Posey as he crawled onto his pony, and they rode away. Well, the
Mhm.
settlers just assumed that they were gonna come in and burn the village to the ground. And several weeks later, she said she was cooking cornbread in her kitchen. And I learned this story from my grandfather at our old fishing cabin when he was cooking cornbread in an old wood sheepherder stove. And as he told me the story, I never forgot it. But she said the door to her cabin creaked open and a hat came in on a stick. And she looked over at the hat, and Posey poked his head in and he said, "Me no mad, me just want biscuits." And
Yes.
she said, "Well, when I'm done cooking, I'll give you something to eat." And she said Chief Posey went out and cut an armload of wood while she finished cooking something, and they became fast friends. And it was actually this band of Indians who were the renegades that forged a friendship with my great great grandmother, much to the anger of the town marshal and the U.S. government. And in the end, they were the ones that went and tried to solve her murder, and whether it was successful or not, you'd have to read.
Yeah. It's it's a great book, you guys. Like I said, and it's from the very beginning, and it's fascinating to read about the history. And even, my grandparents were immigrants as well from Italy, and even the whole voyage over was just fascinating. And of course, I don't know if Beth's in here right now, but Beth, there's sharks in there, so you know.
Yeah,
That hits so hard to me. She's terrified.
you can't miss Betty Hume's funeral in the book. That's
Oh my gosh. I was telling him the way he writes about this, I could see it, unfortunately, because it was so well written in my head. It's you'll just have to read it. But yeah, I thought of Beth at that point because um Beth is terrified of sharks. So I immediately thought of her. I'm like, oh, I'm Beth's gonna have to buy this book and read this part too. But no, it's such a great book. You guys should
it
really
would be
read
a
it.
great Christmas present for somebody.
Yes. And yeah, yes. Oh, there you are, Beth. I wasn't sure if you were here. I immediately, yeah, you'll have to read it. Um, and I'd love to have you on the show soon again because I always love catching up with you. And I feel like it's only been a couple of months. It feels like it's been a long time. Um,
Thankfully,
but
we have texting to keep in touch with each other,
yes.
but it is always a pleasure to talk to you. And it's so fun to see so many familiar names in the chat, and just you just have so many people who support you, and it's wonderful. And it's an honor to be able to come on your show.
Oh, well, thank you. We always love having you on. It's always so interesting to get your perspective on everything. And again, I'm sure you guys already are, but if you're not subscribed to Profiling Evil, I have the link in the description below. I have the link to the book below. So please go check that out. Go subscribe. Like I said, I'm sure you already are.
Oh
But
yeah, do that. In fact, we're giving away like Amazon gift cards and Adventures with Purpose stuff and all kinds of stuff during the 12 days of Christmas, but you have to be subscribed. It's our um, cheap way of getting people to sign up with us, I guess.
yes. So then if I'm in, like I said, we have so many crossovers, I'm sure there, but if you aren't, please go over there and sub. And then don't forget, of course, to like and subscribe to this video, share it out. Um, and now we're switching over to, it's a busy night for us here. Wednesday nights always are, though. We're switching over to weekly True Crime and Wine on Wednesdays. We have those every week for our Patreon members and channel members. And we just sit around, talk true crime, have some drinks. So it's a really fun time. If you're not a Patreon member or a channel member, I strongly recommend that you stop by for, check it out for a week or two. And it's always a good time. So, and of course, you're always welcome, Mike,
Thank you. It's
to come
such
hang
an
out.
honor to be with you.
They get really interesting, especially after the first hour or two. But
Well,
anyway,
make sure
thank you.
you get a couple of teaspoons of cough syrup too.
Really, I know. I was like, I don't know how much of a cocktail I'm going to have tonight since I'm getting sick again. It seems to be my lot in life this fall, but whatever. Cold medicine it will be tonight. But thank you so much, Mike. And it was great talking to you. And have a great night, everyone. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and love you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.